Countering Hegemony, the Songs and Social Praxis of Poykayil Appachan. Over to you, sir.
Good morning to all, and thank you very much for this invitation. I thank the Department of History, University of Kerala, Mahatma Ayyankali Chair, and all the good friends, Dr. Jinimon, Professor Satish, Dr. Sajna, and all the research scholars and Professor Sanal Mohan, who inaugurated this great event, this historic event, and all the respected friends and colleagues and researchers. Very good morning to you all, and I'm happy, very much happy, and truly honored to be part of the Mahatma Ayyankali Chair lectures. It's going to be a series of lectures, webinars, and offline seminars and all. So you are organizing this. I specifically congratulate Dr. Jinimon and his colleagues for organizing this kind of a very concerted, epistemologically very important and vital and very much crucial kind of a lecture series on the Renaissance leaders of Kerala, the Renaissance modernity of Kerala, and also the transformations and social changes that have happened in our state in a context when this modernity is in peril. This modernity of Kerala, this Renaissance culture of grassroots level democratization, it is being under threat. Even our constitution is under threat now. And the foundations of the Indian Constitution, social justice at large is in question. Modernity at large is in peril. So anyway, I appreciate, I congratulate the Department of History, University of Kerala, and Mahatma Ayyankali Chair in particular for all these novel knowledge endeavors which are extremely relevant and highly significant to the context. So talking about Poykayil Appachan or Poykayil Yohanan or Sree Kumara Gurudevan, as he's often referred to today, or Gurudevan himself. This is something about the foundational social fabric and social formations, and also the grassroots level democratic formations of Kerala, especially that happened towards the beginning of the 20th century, the last century. So it's almost a century over. But still we are lacking, of course, in much critical scholarship and historiographical writing. Of course, we need to salute Professor Sanal Mohan here, who has come up with that great work, Modernity of Slavery, Anti-Caste Articulations in Colonial Kerala. Apart from that work, apart from a few translations like what I have done on Poykayil Appachan, some almost 40 songs are now surviving. Almost 37 to 40 songs are there. I got the opportunity to translate it into English way back in 2008. But apart from these a little bit of translations and also some kind of theoretical and critical and historiographical work done by eminent scholars like Professor Sanal Mohan himself. Apart from that, even today, there is a dearth, there is a kind of critical vacuum regarding these leading figures who came from the real majority of people, from the bottom of society, from the grassroots level. You need to dig up the kind of knowledge that is still being unexplored. So there is an element of challenge and an area of even say shadowy darkness that is there. So perhaps because of this improper or inadequate kind of addressing of these issues. That's why perhaps we are facing the challenges in the present. That's why Kerala society is regressing into the primitive. If you look at the history of the last few decades, especially after the rise of cultural nationalism in the country, especially after the rise of the Hindu Nationalist Party at the center in the beginning of the 21st century, what has happened in India as a whole and in Kerala, especially to history, especially to humanities, critical humanities and research, postgraduate level and postdoctoral level of research, what happened to research at the universities, you will find the alarming kind of situations, especially in the context of the new educational policy, something called the National Educational Policy, which was passed by the Parliament and also by the Cabinet, Union Cabinet in 2020. The situation is really alarming and threatening. So in order to face these contemporary dilemmas and the crisis that are being experienced by the civil society, the academic community, the higher education in general, and also it is happening to the media also. So the media and academia, these the important arenas of exploration of knowledge and dissemination of socio-cultural values in society. The chief educational kind of agencies in society, they have almost failed, especially because of the policy changes and also the equations of power that I mentioned earlier. Because of these changes in the last few decades, things have gone to the primitive again. We are facing many backlashes and many reactionary regressions in the present. That's how the Vishwasi Lahala happened in Kerala. Kerala witnessed that kind of anti-democratic, anti-constitutional, anti-legal, anti-ethical, and almost you could say self-negating kind of self-destructive modes of reactionary politics we have witnessed in recent times, especially from 2018 onwards. And 2018 is not a kind of bolt from the blue. It was actually in the making for at least the last 10 or 20 years. So it has been in the making. So this reactionary regressions, this retreats into the primitive kind of ideology and politics. This happened in Kerala, which boasts about its Renaissance culture and Renaissance modernity and grassroots level democratization. So what is the place of Mahatma Yankali or Poykayil Appachan or persons like Saudharan Ayyappan or Narayana Guru in Kerala? The modernity of Kerala is completely eroded because we are not addressing it. We are not propagating the critical scholarship and knowledge. We are not disseminating the knowledge, the contemporary critical knowledge on these things. Our academia and media have failed to address these important issues and disseminate the important critical knowledge on these things to the people. That's how they have become followers of some other jingoistic kind of cultural nationalist kind of imaginary and social imagination, and you have this kind of reactionary situations developing. The Vishwasi Lahala coming back. We are going back into the primitive barbaric days where Poykayil Appachan himself was facing the assassinations on his life. Assassination attempts were there on the very life of Poykayil Appachan in Kerala. That happened in the 1930s, 1920s and 1930s in Kerala. So we are just a century away from that particular barbaric and inhuman, violent, genocidal kind of casteist violence. Professor Sanil Mohan himself has elaborated on those caste riots and caste violence was plenty of violence, bloodshed. The Vagathanam meeting of Poykayil Appachan, or Mudalapura Raksha Nirnayana Yogam of Poykayil Appachan, or all those evangelical and kind of say liberative theological so-called spiritual kind of meetings, he was attacked, and he was saved by some of his close friends and associates. Even he had to use the disguise. He was given the attire of women, and he was dressed up like a woman, and then he was saved by women themselves. Komaragam Chinnamma of Kottayam, she actually used her country boat, a little boat, and she rescued him across the Lake Vembanad to Alappuzha region, to Cherthala. She actually she rescued when his very life was in danger. He couldn't even come to the mainland then. He was taken to Cherthala, to the far-off region west of the Vembanad Lake. Like Komaragam Chinnamma, women like Dalit women like Komaragam Chinnamma and many other women, they tried to save the life of Appachan. So into that kind of primitive barbarism, into this kind of genocidal and violent forms of othering and exclusion and even annihilation, not just the kind of symbolic violence that I'm talking about, but also material violence and physical violence. It's coming back. What we have seen on the streets during the Shabarimala rite, abusing and ethnic slurs and casteist abuse. A casteist abuse was even hurled at the chief minister of Kerala, who boasts about the Renaissance culture, who used the names of Nangeli and Dalavakulam and Arattuzha Velayathapunikar and Poykayil Appachan and others in order to defend this constitutional position and in order to implement his constitutional responsibilities. Because the Supreme Court of India, the constitutional bench of the Supreme Court of India, it was in favor, unanimously gave a verdict in favor of gender justice in 2018. You must remember those moments of regression. Then only we will get the gravity of Poykayil Appachan. What did he do? What kind of changes he made possible in Kerala, and into what kind of darkness that we are going back in the cultural nationalist kind of ambitions, and to grab more and more over-representations and monopolies in power. What are we destroying? We need to remember. So even the chief minister would try to implement the Supreme Court constitutional bench's unanimous verdict for gender justice. That I talked about justice at large in the beginning. If you undo the book of ethics and justice, if you destroy the Constitution of India, nothing would remain. In order to grab more over monopolies and maintain your status quo and improve your over representation, if you tamper with the Constitution of India, nothing would remain. That's happening. It's literally happening on a daily basis now. Now those who have struggled to destroy the social justice core of Indian Constitution, they can acknowledge what is happening now. They can have a kind of second thought now, at least now. It's better late than never. Still we have the possibility. Still we can change it. So that's why we are again and again we are coming to this. So even to give a classic case in point, even the chief minister, the Avarna chief minister, an aged man, he was hurled with the casteist abuse and slur on the streets of Kerala in 2018 when this Vishwasi Lahala, the so-called Nama Japa Ghosha Yatra happened, when this kind of what you call the N.K. Jose has written, the popular historian, the local historian N.K. Jose, almost 94 years of age, he has written soon after 2018. In 2019, he wrote and published that book called Shudra Lahara, Dalit Bandhu N.K. Jose. Tomorrow his new book is going to be released. I'm going for that. He has written about Kerala Tanima, the identity, the personality of Kerala. We are reminded of your own Vice Chancellor, Professor A. Ayyappan, Ainipalli Ayyappan from Thrissur. Professor A. Ayyappan was also the curator. He was a transdisciplinary kind of scholar. He's also the founder of CDS, but unfortunately, his photograph is not found. Or even in Kerala University, you don't know that kind of a vice chancellor because, again, because of his subject position. He was an Avarna, like the chief minister of Kerala today. And unfortunately, we don't know. Fortunately or unfortunately, we don't know about what all things Professor Ayyappan, Professor Ainipalli Ayyappan had to hear during his lifetime, especially during his stay in Kerala and Trivandrum in particular. So the personality of Kerala is a work by, it's a title by Professor Ayyappan, who went to up to Odisha, and he was the founding director and the curator of Odisha State Museum. He was also the curator and superintendent of Madras Museum in Chennai, Egmore Museum. And also he was the founding director and professor of Department of Anthropology in Utkal University in Bhubaneswar. So many things. He was has been to Delhi and all. But he was never acknowledged here. And he had to resign. He couldn't even initiate a department of anthropology. His own, he was a student of Malinowski and all. But when he came back here, like Ambedkar, when he came back from Columbia and the University of London with those 2 PhDs, he was kicked out of even the Parsi restaurant and the Parsi Inn. He was not given a place to sleep. Baba Sahib has experienced it. Professor A. Ayyappan is another example. So I was reminded of this title of Professor A. Ayyappan, the personality of Kerala, cultural revolution in a Kerala village. All these things are very important as a transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary kind of scholar who has touched upon the whole of humanities, critical humanities and social sciences. The model of Ayyappan, Professor Ainipalli Ayyappan, Vice Chancellor of Kerala, is very important. And this kind of a title now we have in Dalit Bandhu also. Dalit Bandhu N.K. Jose in his 90s, at the age of 94, he has brought out this new book called the Personality of Kerala, or the Identity of Kerala. This is more accent on not just personality, but identity and subjectivity as well. These are the categories that we are into the discussion today. So Kerala Tanima, or the Identity of Kerala, that's his latest work, 2022 work. That's going to be released tomorrow at his residence in Vaikam, Ambiga Market, Vaikam, near Vaikam, Vechur. I am also being part of that. So this kind of a tradition, this kind of a modernity, that is under threat, as pointed out by Dalit Bandhu N.K. Jose's own work in 2019, Shudra Lahla. Shudra Lahla has happened. And under the pressure tactics, or in the background of that, an ordinance was passed in the Legislative Assembly of Kerala that destroyed the Indian Constitution. The foundation of it, the social justice core, because as the Constitution guarantees, as the preamble guarantees, justice, primarily social, then economic and political, and so on and so forth. So justice is primarily social. And if you destroy that social justice in order to improve your overrepresentations and barbaric monopolies on power and positions, you will destroy the Constitution. And if you destroy the Constitution, the democratic book of ethics in India, you will destroy the Indian democracy and the Indian nation and the people and the society at large. At least we must acknowledge this reality, this truth. This justice and truth must be acknowledged by at least the so-called educated people, because the so-called educated people, the professionals, the engineers and doctors, and even teachers and university teachers were at the forefront of this Nama Japa Ghosha Yatra and Vishwasi Lahala. protesting against women's own right to enter a public space. Even the Supreme Court was in favor. The constitutional bench, it couldn't surpass the Constitution because it's the book of ethics. So there, social justice and gender justice are there, are key to the Constitution of India. But unfortunately, that was trampled and tarnished and destroyed to the core. And that's what we are experiencing. What all things we need to see from now. It's going to be ridiculous and unimaginable. And let us see and watch. Anyway, there are chances to resist it. Still, there are possibilities for a collective kind of rethinking and a kind of re-strengthening of the resistance, the cultural and also the socio-political kind of resistance against this kind of formations in the country. So it is in this kind of a crucial juncture that we are discussing about some of the foundational voices, the so-called seminal voices of Kerala's modernity and Kerala's democracy and Kerala's Renaissance culture, because we don't have much to boast about. As Professor Sanal Mohan's own book has revealed, it was casteist violence, it was slavery. That's the most important thing. From Poykayil Appachan to Professor Sanal Mohan, they have enlightened us. They have very significantly, in a socially significant, socio-politically significant act, they have enlightened us about the reality of Kerala, that it was a casteist society. And this casteist society was working on slavery, grassroots level slavery, everywhere slavery, caste slavery. It was there. Jadiye vidhikkunnu, jadiye sthabikkunnu, jadiyal ninnidunnu, jati tan Hindu madam, wrote another contemporary. Southern Ayyappan, the lead disciple of Narayana Guru. Jadi Manishane Kadutunu Avishamilla, Guru said. Guru has delivered the great messages of organization and education. Educate so that you are liberated. And organize so that you are empowered. So these were taken up by the Dalit brethren of the Guru and Sahodaran. And it was Mahatma Iyenkali who has actually carried out, who has dynamically and forcefully, and even he used the might, even the physical kind of strength and organizational power in order to overthrow that hegemony, to fight for the basic human rights to walk on the public road, to use a vehicle, to use a bullock cart, to walk with a decent kind of dressing. The Lavakulam martyrs, they were trying for that, but they were butchered, almost 200 of them. And after they were pushed into the slush and mud of the Lavakulam on the eastern gateway of that shrine, which was till 16th century, it was a Mahayana Buddhist shrine. Wrote people like local historians like Dalit Bandhu himself, and from people, European scholars like Stella Kramrisch, they have unraveled the Buddhist background of Kerala and its olden shrines. So from Nangeli, 1803, the sacrifice of Nangeli happened, but unfortunately, as I told you, the chief minister was hurled at with this casteist slur. And he used the name of Nangeli to defend the Renaissance culture by saying that women like Nangeli, women like Shakuntala Devi, who was in the forefront of the breastcloth struggles of Nadar women. It's actually Nadar women who began that struggle. Nangeli, of course, she began it, of course, as a solitary voice. She protested in Charthala and she had to sacrifice her very life before that. And that is now rendered into a myth. There is a dominant tendency from both the elite scholars in Kerala and also from even the European scholars, even Osalas and all, because they have confessed later. But in their ignorance, or in their what you call mediated kind of knowledge that they got from the Indian and Kerala elites, they wrote that Arattura was a myth, or Nangeli was a myth. But still the descendants of these people are there in Charthala. Nangeli's granddaughters are living there in Chautala. So how can it be a myth? How can Aratapura be a myth? So these kind of mythicization of history, like Walter Benjamin talking about the aestheticization of politics and the politicization of aesthetics. The second one is advisable, says Benjamin, who wrote about the thesis on history and the philosophy of history and all those things, the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction and all. He says about this thing, the politicization of art, it is to be done. It must be there. There should be a socio-political scrutiny and critical analysis of art, a check on art, a check on human imagination. That is imminent and that is very important. But at the same time, the aestheticization of politics, that can only bring back the old kind of barbarism, the kind of despotism and totalitarian pro-fascist regimes would be the result as we are experiencing it today. So anyway, Appachan, Poykayil Appachan, he was actually the pioneer of, say, this democratization of the people in Kerala. And he was also the pioneer of bringing back the real history and memory of the people. That is the most important thing. He was very particular about this slave issue. This is the only thing, the most important. Many things are there in relation to his songs and spirituals and articulations and strategies and social organizations and so on and so forth. He was part of Ayyankali's own Sadhu Jana Paripalana Sangham in 1907, soon after the initiation of the organizational message of the Guru. The SNDP was instituted in 1903, and within 3-4 years, in 1904, Mahatma Ayyankali pioneered the most important Dalit organization in the whole of India, that is Sadhu Jana Paripalana Sangham. We used those keywords in that early time, in early 20th century. Sadhu Jana and also Sangham. These are very important keywords in the history of humanity, civilization, and India in particular, because these are actually the words of the Buddha, the Sangha, Dharma, Sangha, and Buddha, and also Sadhu Jana. So he was operating outside the Vedic and Vedantic metaphysical kind of school. The dominant Sanatana, Varnashrama kind of paradigm was abandoned, totally critiqued and abandoned by knowingly or unknowingly. As we know, his greatest dream was to get a few graduates from his community. He wanted to get that education. That's why he initiated all those things, the Urutambalam struggle, Perinad Lahala, the Viluvandi Yatra, and all those things for human rights, for the basic rights of walking on public spaces. And that was now women themselves are trying to reject that right. They don't want to enter a public place of worship. All the worshipping places must be public spaces and public places. You need to bring it into that and that kind of a purview. Anyway, it is Ayyankali who began, and actually in mid-Travancore, it is Poykayil Appachan who actually practiced it in society, especially among the most deprived, the former slaves. He himself was from that background of slavery. His parents, Kandan of Malapalli, Kandan, and also Lechi of Manikal Poykayil. It's actually his mother's family name, Poykayil Manikal, that is it. Manikale Manikyam. This Shantakumar, V.V. Shantakumar, I think he has made a play on Poykayil Appachan. Many music videos are there, many documentary videos are there. We were also part of making that Poykayil De Pattum Pantiyum, a YouTube documentary video on the life and songs of Poykayil Appachan, which is called Poykayil De Pattum Pantiyum. The songs and sect of Poykayil Appachan, you can see it freely on the YouTube. It's Appachan who actually pioneered that democratization process, social change in mid-Travancore, in particular in the context of slavery. Caste slavery was here. Slave markets were there. He went and sang his songs at Anjuvilaku, the market of Changanasheri. Changanasheri was a great center of Changan and Changam, that is Sangham, and Simhan. They are called Changan and Chingan and all. It was a great Buddhist place, but unfortunately from the Middle Ages onwards, with the advent of this Hindu feudal system, caste Hindu feudalism, at least from the beginning of the 12th or 13th century onwards, it was used as the Anjuvilak, which was founded by Veluthambi himself towards the beginning of the 19th century. In 1805, Anjuvilak of Changanasheri, it was a slave market. Many other, even in Vagatan and Chanda, in Nyalianguri, and many other places, these were torturing places of slaves. Many, even today, the elders of PRDS, which was instituted by Poykayil Appachan in 1910 in a colonial British court, when he was, when the European judge, when the judge asked him about his denominations and his group, he said, I am Poykayil Yohanan, and I am the leader, and I am the Lord, and the Lord and Master of all I serve. I am the master and Lord of this organization called Pratyaksha Raksha Daiva Sabha, PRDS. He was arrested during his evangelical rallies and meetings in Mudalepura, close to Changanasheri. And he was amidst thousands and thousands of friends and disciples and community people. And then the next day, he was summoned to the court, and he came to the court on a bullock cart and made the statement that I am Poykayil Yohanan. I am the Lord of PRDS. So that's how PRDS, he was, as I told you, in 1907, when Mahatma Iyenkali founded his Sadhujana Paripalana Sangham, he was he was a member and a close associate of Iyenkali's Sadhujana Paripalana Sangham. And later, in 1910, because he was working for the mid-Travancore region, Iyenkali was working mostly active in the South Travancore region, especially in and around Travancore and up to Kollam, Perinayar and all his activities were there. Up to Mulur's Ilavanditta and all, Pathanamthitta, Iyenkali had been active, and also his associates Kurumban Daivathan and later Keshavan Shastrigal and all, they were active. But in the areas of Changanasheri and Tiruvalla, in the old Tiruvalla Taluk, in the northern part up to Kottayam, there was no one to articulate the Dalit kind of question. There was no one to articulate the subaltern subjectivity and subject position there. So he addressed that issue. He addressed the people with the key issue of history and memory. That's what is linking with him. Antonio Gramsci, we have that statement of Gramsci that the subaltern cannot enter into history. The speech of the subaltern is fragmented and episodic. The subaltern cannot enter history. But there will be a time when the subaltern will come to power. Subaltern will also come to hegemony. He dreamed about that. So exactly like that. Exactly like Ambedkar writing about the role of the intellectual and distinguishing the intellectual from the Pandit or the scholar. Appachan was into that because he was with all the churches. He was the preacher. Yohanan. That's why he became a Bible scholar, and he was preaching the Bible. He's called Yohanan Upadeshi, Yohanan the preacher. But he abandoned because, as I told you, they were actually Kandan and Lechi. They were the properties as slaves, as agricultural slaves in Kerala. They were the property of that Changaramangalam household. Mathamite Syrian Christian household. They were having that. Christianity was also in the later Middle Ages or in early modern age till 19th century. Even Christian feudal lords were there. it's a kind of regional manifestation. In Malabar, you will find some Muslim feudal lords there. Because of the complexity and diversity of the caste feudal system in Kerala, many local elites have also been co-opted into this kind of casteist slavery. So it was not just the caste Hindus who propagated this kind of a slavery, casteist slavery, but many even minority elites were also, some Syrian Christian elites were also into this bloody business of slavery. So they were into that, but these lords were a little liberal. They were Marthamite Christians, so they wanted even their slaves and subordinates to be part of the Christian evangelical mission in Kerala, and they allowed them to baptize themselves and embrace Christianity, and that's how Appachan became a scholar in Bible. That's how he learned the art of reading and writing, and that's how somehow he has become a kind of Bible scholar. And he was with the Marthoma Church. He could have become a kind of Upadeshi and a preacher and a person of that church. But he identified inequality. Even within the new sect, even within the minority religion, he identified that inequality. And he addressed that inequality, and he quit the church, the Marthoma Church, because even the missionaries, even the Europeans, not just the regional kind of clergy, but even the missionaries were not giving a kind of egalitarian space. So his sense of ethics and justice was that much keen. That's why he left the Marthoma Church. Then he operated with, he still had collaborations with many missionaries and many reverend fathers of many congregations and churches. He worked with the Irish mission. Mahatma Phule got education from the Irish and Scottish missionaries in particular. So Appachan was with the Irish mission, something called the Brethren mission. But there also, even in the Brethren mission, which is a kind of most radical kind of frontline kind of a kind of Protestant kind of movement, even in the Brethren mission, he found this kind of inequality, the casteist element creeping into all the minority sects and polluting it. In India, it has happened even to the latest religion in India, that is in 15th, 16th century, Sikhism. Even in Sikhism, despite Ravidas and Raidas and all those untouchable saints, they are accepted within the Guru Granth Sahib tradition. Still, the Dalit Sikhs are not getting justice. They are even beaten up on an everyday basis. Every year we have those riots, violent riots between, unfortunate riots between the Dalit Sikhs and the Jat Sikhs, the Savarna Sikhs. So it has polluted the latest religion, that is Sikhism in India. So you can imagine what happened to Buddhism, what happened to Christianity, and also what happened partially to Islam also in many parts of the country, as late Professor Asghar Ali Engineer himself has elaborated, the social stratification, because it's the rooted kind of social reality in India, for at least from the time of Manusmriti, from the assassination of the great Mauryan emperors after Ashoka. Bradratha was killed by Sunga, from the days of that Sungan regime, the Brahmanical regime, Pushyamitra Sunga assassinating his own Mauryan emperor through cheat and third-rate kind of means. This has been there, so it's very difficult to get out of it. So Appachan got himself out of these casteist kind of congregations, and after the this Marthoma Church, he went to this Brethren mission, and from there he associated with this departure mission or Verbad Sabha, and there also he found many unequal spaces, social graded inequality. As Ambedkar says, this graded inequality, it is so subtle and micro-political that only very keen, sensitive observers or Those who experience alone, they can only understand the importance of experience and theory, says Gopal Guru and others. The experience that creates a kind of critical consciousness and theory. So, like Antonio Gramsci and Ambedkar, Appachan was very conscious to analyze and identify the rootedness of this kind of this barbarism, the casteist barbarism, the caste slavery. And he was conscientizing the people. He was disseminating the critical knowledge on this through his speeches, through his songs, through his spirituals, through his sermons. He was speaking like the Buddha everywhere he was speaking. There is a saying that the Buddha never sleeps. It was same in the case of Appachan also. He was always talking, always singing and dancing and moving like a chamana, moving like an amana or shramana. That was his strategy. So he used that travel meetings. The meeting itself, we have traveling theater companies and moving theater now. There is no determined, definite kind of stage. It's a moving theater. So you have something like a moving meeting. Nowhere, only in the African American context, you can think of that. Only Toni Morrison and Richard Wright or James Baldwin, they have written about this kind of moving kind of organizations, or the meeting itself is moving. It will start in a particular place, but there are serious threats on his life. Then very strategically, playfully, they will move gradually into another kind of place. So it was all strategy, all cultural politics, all performance, cultural kind of performance. He was into that, and he was into singing and dancing. So he organized those traveling meetings, and also something called the salvation meetings, or Pratyaksha Raksha Nirnayana Yogams, or Raksha Nirnayana Yogams, as what happened in 1905 to 1915 in many places, like the hillock of Kulatur Kunna, or he organized a long meeting, which was almost running into 2 months. Every day they were having the attendants and the protectors and the guards deployed all around that hillock, so that these assassins may not creep into this. But still they were having many confrontations and open beatings and resistance, and plenty of people were killed. Many got injured, and many people, even women, Dalit women, have become martyrs defending the precious life of Appachan. So even in early 20th century, it was happening in 1910s, 1920s, almost up to 1930s. By 1930s, these things have receded, and Appachan has established his headquarters in Eraviperu. And he was also an acceptable person in Travancore, because in 1921, he became the people's representative in the Travancore State Legislative Council, Srimulam Prajasabha. He went to Prajasabha twice in 1921 and also in 1931. Almost towards the end of demise, he passed away in 1939. He was born in 1869, February 17. His birthday is coming. Next week it is going to happen. February 17. Janmadinam. അതിൻ്റെ സ്നേഹവന്ദനം എല്ലാവരെയും, അപ്പച്ചൻ്റെ ബർത്ത്ഡേയുടെ സ്നേഹവന്ദനം, ആശംസകൾ എല്ലാവർക്കും arpikiyan. So anyway, he passed away in 1939. So towards the end of his life, he got a kind of acceptance, a social acceptance. But later, even after his life, his legacy was the hegemonic forces. They tried to assimilate that legacy, but it is very difficult, as in the case of Ayyankali or Narayana Guru. Recently, we have witnessed that that rejoinder, or that rejection of the Guru himself from the Republic Day parade, because the hegemonic forces, they tried to assimilate and Hinduize the Guru, the teachings of the Guru, but they were not that much successful. They were slightly challenged, or they were dissatisfied with that kind of an image of the Guru. They failed to create a Hinduized image of the Guru, and that's why now he is totally being rejected. So likewise, there had been, or there has been, many attempts from the hegemonic forces to Hinduize Appachan also. But they cannot touch him because his work is there. His songs and articulations are there. At least some 30 to 40 songs are there today that can resist it, because it is talking about the caste slavery of Hinduism, and also how Hinduism and this casteist mentality has crept into even the minority religions, like the dominant form of Christianity, the Syrian Christianity formation in Kerala. And it's also a kind of say political lesson, again in the context of the sabotage of democracy and sabotage of Indian constitution, because these hegemonic formations across religion, they are having a kind of evil axis. They're having a kind of coalition politics in order to resist the social democracy paradigm of the constitution, especially the inclusive paradigm, the fundamental paradigm of democracy. Without social representation, there is no democracy at all. Democracy is nothing but the politics of representation. Without social representation, there is no democracy. But these forces across religions and castes and communities in Kerala, and also in many places in India, they are operating in tandem to sabotage the social representation of the excluded people. Excluded voices like Appachan or Mahatma Iyenkali, and also people like Southaran and others. So it's high time that we bring all these voices into the center stage of academics and media work. Otherwise, this is the reactionary thing. This is the regression. The loss of India, the loss of Indian constitution, the sabotage of justice at large will happen. And now let us come back to, I hope I can, how many minutes I can continue?
Sir, just 5 or 10 minutes, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much. So now let us come back to the songs and the articulation of the slave memories by Appachan. Appachan says that grief fills within. Grief fills within when we think about the suffering of the ancestors. And let me add something in my own melody. That's the articulation of Appachan. So he was bringing and developing his own idiom, his own, contemporary kind of expression and articulation in a language and idiom that was acceptable and communicable to the people of Kerala during that time. And he was also into a kind of communitarian politics, including and involving and inclusivizing many untouchable castes and subcastes. So he was for the alleviation of subcaste divisions and also caste division. So that's why even Syrian Christians were part of his PRDS movement in the beginning. Even today, there are many families associated with the Syrian Christian tradition within collaborating with the PRDS movement today. And also the other communities, other OBCs of the Hindu fold, they have also collaborated with Appachan. The Iravas and the Nadars and the Vishwakarmas and all, they were all into, in many southern branches of PRDS, there are many OBC communities as well. So this kind of a broader alliance, a solidarity, a fraternity, a larger fraternity and a paradigm of Maitri, greater compassion, greater fraternity and brotherhood and sisterhood. This was created by Appachan in and through his organization. So he was not just what you called a literateur or a poet or a versifier who used the ballad tradition, the the Southern ballad tradition, Chenganuradi and all, Appachan himself wrote and rewrote and altered the traditions of Chenganuradi in and through his songs. He was using more of a contemporary idiom. He was into a kind of modernist articulation, which many of his poems, he talks about the ethics of Christianity. He has even burned the Bible as an act of protest in order to protest the misuse of Bible in Asian African countries by some of the, say, dominant forces, the casteist forces who crept into the minority religions. He even burned. It happened in Wagathanam. In Wagathanam meeting, it happened. His life was in danger. So that kind of concerted critique he has done in epistemology. He probed history. എൻ്റെ വംശത്തിൻ ചരിതം എഴുതി വച്ചിടുവാൻ അന്നീ ഉർവിയിൽ ആരുമില്ലാതെ പോയല്ലോ. There was nobody to write down the history of my people, my race during those days. I probed all the histories of the world. I am probing and seeking into all the histories of the world. It's not exactly clear whether he was aware of English language and all. Anyway, he has addressed and he has embraced all the positive, liberative dimensions of modernity. He himself has sung about in those songs. This is the translation which is published by the PRDS Institute itself in 2008. Some 36 poems are here. Professor Sanil Mohan has done a few translations, and also Professor Catherine Tangamma has done beautiful translations. Translations are very much part of the Oxford and Penguin anthologies now. And also, it all began with a simple booklet that was published by the Sahodaran Prasidhikaranam Wagathanam in 2006. This is the first book that was published by the Sahodaran Prasadhanam Wagathanam in 2006 that initiated the new movement. V.V. Swami and EVNL, they have the intellectuals from the PRDS movement itself. They have edited and compiled it, and I was fortunate to translate it. But only in 2011, only this century, after almost a century, for almost a century, Appachan was denied publication. And only recently, in 2011, Kerala Sahitya Academy has published the songs of Poykayil Appachan, that too under the title, under a different title called PRDS Part 2. Appachan's authorship and subjectivity is still in question. So we need more books, more concrete books, and more comprehensive volumes of Appachan, both in Malayalam as well as in English and the world languages, in French and Spanish and Portuguese, and also that the world can know more about, especially in English, we can do that. So there is an urgent need to rehabilitate the voices of Appachan and many others. Even Guru's own rational voice, it is lacking. And his disciples like Pandit Karuppan or Mulur Padmanabha Panikar or Sahadran Ayyappan, all these great poets and visionaries and social reformers and political thinkers and leaders and philosophers of Kerala must be highlighted in our curriculum, must be brought into the center stage of our syllabi, the university syllabi, the agenda of higher education and research in particular. And also the media must also listen to these voices. Otherwise, our society, our democracy, our country, the foundation of our ethical living, that is the book of law, the constitution itself is in peril. If you destroy the constitution, you will destroy the whole of the nation and the whole of the people. And let us, like Poykayil Appachan, let us dream about the liberation from this caste slavery. It will happen. The yoke of slavery has broken. The yoke of slavery has ended. Music and joy for us. He sung at Anjivulak in the slave market of Changanasheri. He was singing loud like this. Adima nugam takarnida. Adima ole arinida. Namukku pattum sandoshavum. Namukku pattum sandoshavum. music and joy for us. The greetings of Poykayil Appachan's birthday to all of you, and I am really thankful for you for giving me an opportunity to deliver the first lecture on Poykayil Appachan Sree Kumara Gurudevan of Kerala. And I really salute you all, and I hope Mahatma Yankali Chair and the Department of History, Kerala University, would initiate further new debates and discourses, critical discourses on our Renaissance leaders and thinkers like Appachan. A lot of ground to be covered. It's a difficult task, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your engaging and enthusiastic talk on cultural revolution in Kerala in general and the contributions of Poykayil Appachan in particular. I'm sure all of us are amazed to see the gravity of that person and his enormous effort in shaping the modernity of Kerala. Now the webinar is open for discussion. Is there any questions?
Hello, Ajay sir. I'm Dr. Sajana from Department of History. Sir, it was very wonderful presentation. Sir, I have a doubt that when we look into our Kerala Renaissance, we can see that many of our leaders, they went for some sort of Sanskritization. And but we can see some very few people like Iyengali and some others, they never invoked any religion. Iyengar never wanted a temple or similar things like Narayana Guru. Narayana Guru never asked for temple entry because he already established some temples. So can we say it was the efforts of these communal leaders that led to a kind of communal or caste revivalism in Kerala? So there are some criticism about Kerala Renaissance about that. So I want to know something about that, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sajana, for that very relevant contemporary question. So it is true that in Renaissance self-fashioning, in the reformist zeal of Renaissance, some kind of, modernizations happened, but it was also part of the local culture and idiom here. And since they were intervening, for example, Ayya Vaikunthar or Taikadaya or Narayana Guru, since they were dealing with the local traditions and the local people here, it was difficult for them to abandon all the local languages and cultural practices. So they did a kind of, reform. Reform was also part of Ayyankali's own movement, because Kallumala Bahishkarana, the ancient barbaric practice of Kallumala, and the bearing of the breasts in public and all those things, it was prohibited by Ayyankali. So he asked the people to be more hygienic and to wear the decent clothes like the others. So there was a kind of standardization. It was done, of course, for the purpose of liberating the people from the most corrupt, most degraded, most slavish kind of postures and positions and past. So that's why the Guru also abandoned many customary practices. The Madan and Maruda and Chatan, these were thrown into the water bodies, and he tried to establish Sharada and Saraswati and Shiva and so on and so forth. So it was done in a reformist kind of zeal, in a critical moment and context in history, for social transform and reformation of the people. Because without a basic ground of hygiene and education, you cannot progress. So they were also having the tools of Malayalam and Sanskrit and Tamil and those local things on. So that's the context in which they have done a kind of reform. A plea for reform was there. But later the Guru himself, he articulated that no longer temples, because temples are going to further intensify casteist kind of divisions and purity pollution things. So no more temples. Now more schools. reading rooms, libraries, and if you need progress, you also can have some factories or workhouses, workshops and factories, libraries and schools, no more temples. Guru himself articulated that. But unfortunately, the people were sticking on to that festivities and the temple rituals, and we all have that longing, the common people in particular. We have that longing, that spiritual yearning, the yearning that bell hooks and Alice Walker are talking about, yearnings of black women, their deep spirituality and their deep creativity, as she explored it in Search of Our Mother's Gardens. Alice Walker herself talking about her mother and grandmother creating those quilts and gardens and cakes. And because of that yearning, people are being subordinated further into that ritualistic kind of domain, which is the fort of Brahmanism itself. So this is the problem that we have to critically engage with and also critically detach with these problems of reform. This is an extremely important issue. We need to critically look into that and also study the alternative voices like Mahatma Yankali and also Poykayil Appachan. Even Poykayil, that's what I said. It's difficult to Christianize or difficult to Hinduize Appachans' practices. And also, as shown by the recent rejection of Guru from the Republic Day float, it's difficult if you read his writings, if you listen to his radical voice, his declarations and critique, it's difficult to Hinduize him. That's how ultimately the regime itself has explained it through their latest rejection. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for an insightful lecture. Sir, you were mentioning about aestheticization of politics. Could you please elaborate on that a bit, sir?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Neetu, for that question. It's actually a concept that was elaborated by Walter Benjamin, that in fascist countries, or with the rise of fascism, there is an aestheticization of politics. But in general, there should be a politicization of aesthetics, because aesthetics are created in a social space. Therefore, art, literature, culture, aesthetics at large, it must be politicized. There should be a political critique, political evaluation, political analysis, and a kind of justification of aesthetics in a political world. But on the other hand, he was showing the other case. The opposite case of aestheticization of politics means you are making everything perfect and unanimous and univocal and homogeneous. There comes the problem. There you will surpass the opposing voices, because in politics, as I told you, politics is nothing but the collective space of the people. Politics as people matters. Politics as the organized or collective movement of the people, or the governance of the world through a people's acts of dialogue and speech acts, interactions and debate. Democratic politics would suffer when you aestheticize it, when you when you confine it to certain aesthetic principles and limitations and regularizations and standardizations and simplifications, and when you reduce it or relate to certain aesthetic kind of principles, the kind of categorization, the kind of unification, the notions of standardization, the notions of going for perfection, so on and so forth. It will actually check the elements of democracy, the element of dissent in particular. So there should be discordance, there should be dissent, there should be space for plurality and diversity of the society to be reflected in politics. So aestheticization of politics means it's nothing but the fascist politics itself. So that is the critique, an illuminating critique provided by Walter Benjamin. I was mentioning about that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
Sir,
Please, Needu, please.
thank you, sir, for your very insightful talk on this topic. And I have a doubt that were the Renaissance movements a curse or a blessing for the Dalit entry into modernity? Because I think that nowadays such movements have led to the formation of another kind of segregation or subdivision among them. For example, like SNDB stood for Iravas, Pulaya Mahasabha for Pulayas, etc. Furthermore, such movements can be seen as advocating for a particular section and subjecting them to politicization also. So, what is the relevance of those institutions on the context of subalternity of contemporary Kerala?
Thank you. Thank you, Neetu, for that very important, crucial question, which is also having a futuristic dimension on our democracy and society, institutions in Kerala, and social processes. Definitely, these institutions or organizations, I mentioned about the great message of organization, the Sanghadana Sandesham and Vidyabhyasa Sandesham of the Guru, that has initiated these kind of organizations, the Sadhujana Paripalana Sangham or PRDS or SNDP, so on and so forth. But after post-Renaissance, especially after the 1940s and 50s in particular, in post-independence days, because of growing Hinduization, the return of these regressive ideas, what happened in recent Shudra Lehala of 2018, it culminated in that, and it abolished the Indian Constitution. It attacked and done with the foundation of Indian Constitution. This has happened because of the growing Hinduization and also because of the silence, as I told you about, the silence on the real legacy, the reality of Kerala's struggles, the reality of the Guru. The real works of the Guru are not taught. Only a few prayer songs that he wrote when he got that Hinduized education in Kumambally, in Pudupalli, in Varanapalli. He received, Guru got a kind of primary education when the other caste Hindu kids went for the English education. In early 19th century, when the Britishers started the English education, all the caste Hindu people who could afford it and who were having the social mobility, they got accepted into the English schools. And when the Kudipalli Kudam schools were abandoned by the caste Hindu kids, Avarnas like Guru and others, Velutheri, Perunelli, Aratura's kids and all, they got admission to the kind of Kudipalli Kudam schools or the Shudra kind of education system. So these kind of realities are not taught. Only a few prayer songs, the Daivaja Dashagam, or some prayerful songs are being taught. His rational critique is not taught. And the most defiant, rational, and radical interpreter of the Guru, that is Sahodaran Ayyappan himself, he is not taught. He is not part of the pedagogy, even in Kerala. So how can you know about the reality of struggle and the history and the past and the struggle against this caste slavery of Kerala? And recently, very recently, that Poykayil Appachan is nominally, not even on a representational level or tattvam or toda. These are key terms of the theology of the PRDS that were set by Appachan himself, tattvam and toda. There is a tattvam of Advaita, but it is not practiced. It is there is a tattvam in the Bible, especially in the New Testament. According to Jesus, God is love. You need to love your neighbor and love all the human beings and the others in this world. So, but it is not exactly practiced. The Advaita is not exactly practiced and it is practiced according to certain todu. So there are certain yardsticks and measures and filters through which these are implemented. So because for generations, or from at least from the 1940s, at least from the 1950s, after the Guru and Poykayil Appachan and Sahodaran in particular, the Hindu reactionary things, the old feudalist nostalgia has crept into our textbooks, and the Hindu history has been taught. Only the history from the 8th or 9th century is taught in the schools in Kerala. Nothing is done on the Ashokan foundations and the Buddhist and Jain and Ajivaka legacy of Kerala. Nothing on the Jewish legacy of Kerala. Nothing on the Christian or Muslim legacy and the Sufi tradition of India and Kerala. But only the Hindu history is being taught as if we were Hindus from the beginning onwards. But it is not like that. The Changam literature, we are taught this Sanskritic kind of things. The Hindu epics and Puranas, the Purana Patathanas, have actually created the groundwork for the recent constitutional sabotage in the Shudra Lahala in 2018. So these kind of Purana Patathanams, the Smriti Shruti Puranas, the imperial textuality of internal imperialism or Hindu colonialism, we don't know about that term. That is not taught. We are taught only about the 200-year-old British colonialism. But we are silent, our textbooks are silent about internal imperialism. So since our textbooks and history books and other kind of curricular kind of sources, these were not talking about the realities and the real history of the people of Kerala, about the great Buddhist tradition and the Jain tradition and the alternative traditions and all. And also it is silent about the critique of Hindu, caste Hindu critical, caste Hindu Sanatana Vedic system. These things have come back, and that is causing this calamity. And also this Hinduization has also crept into, as I told you, into the minority religions and also into the so-called Avarna and Dalit community formations. These community organizations initiated by the Guru, Yankali and Appachan, have become casteist again, because the ideology of caste in the form of Hindu consciousness is working. Hinduism is nothing but a conglomeration of castes. So through Hinduization, the casteist divide, the casteist desire, the casteist envy, it is growing, and it is further creating the caste slavery, consolidating and reificating or reinstalling the casteist hegemony of our time. So Hinduization is to be checked, and humanization must be elaborated. That's the lesson of the PRDS or the original SNDP and all, to consolidate all the humans into one community, going beyond the narrow subcaste and casteist division and going broader into greater human community, and the Maitri, the Sahodariya, which is a key installation of the Guru, Sahodaryam Sarvatra. So let us once again revisit those sites of Sahodariya, fraternity, Maitri, and resist this casteist Hinduization of the social organizations, and try to recover the kind of radical potential and the secular kind of outlook.
Dr. Ajay sir, I have one more doubt from your reply to Nidu, that do we have any Ajivika legacy? Can you explain anything about that?
Pardon, could you please repeat that question? I didn't get the keyword.
Sir, did we have Ajivika legacy in Kerala? That is my doubt.
Okay, very good. Important question. In Tamil, we have many works on Azivagam. They call it Azivagam, Ajivaga philosophy. Gosala, Vakili Gosala, and Keshakambli and all. But the problem with that materialist tradition is that it's mere materialist. It cannot go beyond mere materialism and a kind of rationalism into a larger ethics. And the answer, of course, is it is Buddhism and Jainism, which are more ethically oriented. That's why they are considered as religion. So Ajivaga and Charvaga and many other traditions, materialist traditions are there. In Tamil, there are many references, many inscriptions are also there in Tamilagam, and also many works in Tamil on Azivagam. Azivagam is the Tamil word for that. So they have many in Tamil, but in Kerala, very few people. P.K. Gopalakrishnan mentions it in his Galatinde Samskariya Charitram. And also fictional authors like Kovilan, for example. Kovilan, in his Tattagam, he mentions about Ajivagas. There is a section about the Eluthupalli, the Kudipalli tradition, which where you find the Buddhist tradition basically, and also some Jain and Ajivaga legacies are also part of that. So creative writers like Kovilan, in works like Tattagam, they have mentioned about the Ajivaga legacy of the western parts of Thrissur region. So such references, and even in Kathakali, there are certain characters like the Maskari and all, some mendicants and wanderers, wandering monks are there. I think in many works it is mentioned about Maskari and such mendicant characters in Kathakali and also in Kudiyatam and all. So in many cultural articulations, there are references to the Ajivaga. Even in Eluthachan, I think there are references to the Shramana, like the Digambar kind of Jain Munis are being mentioned. Kanane Digambaran. It's also articulated or interpreted in a Shaivite fashion. Navinmel Nadanam Jayga Enanganane Yatha Kanane Digambaran. He's actually also, according to many critics, is also suggesting about the lost tradition of the Digambara Jain Munis and the Ajivaga legacy in close association, because these three traditions in particular, Buddhist, Jain and Azivagam, they are all mentioned as Amana or Chamana or Shramana. So in many Tamil texts, they are mentioned as Amana. And Azivagam itself, the precise word Azivagam itself is mentioned in many Tamil kind of works in South India. So we cannot have modern Kerala is only a 1956 kind of creation and coinage, we know. Before that, we were Chera land, and the Travancore was there. And before Travancore, it was Vernard, and then the I Kingdom. And before that, it is only the Chera land was there. Chera, Chola, and Pandya, Pallava regions of the greater Tamilagam. So we need to take South India as a unit and improve our strategies, cultural and epistemological resistance to the homogenizing that is happening today. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir. Sir, due to the paucity of time, we can conclude this session, sir.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Gurudeva and others.
Once again, thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation without any reluctance. Moving on to the next lecture.